Welcome to Chapter 18 of Hebrew Grammar 2. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the vocabulary for this chapter. So beginning in the upper right hand of the screen, we have the word Evan or stone. So Evan is stone. There's a place name in the Hebrew Bible, Ebenezer, which means stone of help. So that Ebenezer, you can kind of hear that with that word. There's a personal name here, Aharon or Aaron, the verb bana, which means to build. We have the noun goy, which means a people or a nation. Often it's in the plural, the goyim, like the nations. The verb yarad, which means to go down or descend. The conjunction or pronoun, relative pronoun, ka'asher, which is really the pronoun asher with a kaf preposition, and we would translate that together as when or as. So ka'asher is when or as. Below that we have a noun, machaneh, which is camp, machaneh. In the upper left, we have the noun for tribe, mateh, mateh. The noun for deed or a work, ma'aseh. The verb natan, which means to give, really common verb in the Hebrew Bible. The adjective tzaddik, which means righteous. The name Rivka, which is Rebecca, Rivka. The noun regel, or foot. And then the verb shatah, which means to drink. Well, this lesson is really all about the participle. So let's talk for just a minute about the participle in English. Maybe you're like, I don't remember what a participle is. So let's go back to our junior high grammar and try to remember what a participle is. So participles have like dual citizenship. They are verbs and they are adjectives. They have aspects of both, I guess, verbs and adjectives together. So they have characteristics of each one of those. In English, we have two forms of the participle. There's a present participle and a past participle. The present participle is formed by typically adding ing to a word, so studying, writing, praying. Then there's a past participle that we add ed or n to. Sometimes we use auxiliary verbs with this as well. And you can see some of the examples there. Blessed, written, eaten, sung will be examples of a past participle. So here's a little paradigm here. You have, studying versus the past participle, have studied. Writing, present participle, have written. That's a past participle. And you can see the rest of the examples there. Now, in terms of function, in English, we can use participles in three different ways. First, they can be used attributively. That is, to take the place of an adjective. So here we have the writing prophet. In this sentence, writing is the participle, but it's really functioning like an adjective, right? The writing prophet, or the written word. Here the past participle written is being used as like an adjective. Or the ruling king. Ruling is a participle functioning like an adjective. Or the cursed slave, cursed there being a past participle functioning like an adjective. Or the running water, or the blessed woman. So those are some examples of an attributive use of the participle. Participles can also be used like a verb or predicatively, and in English we typically use a being verb to connect the participle with the subject. So we have like the prophet is writing. Writing here is a verbal idea. It's functioning like a verb. Or the word was written. There's our past participle functioning like a verb. Or the king is ruling. The slave was cursed. And finally, they can be used substantively. Sometimes in English grammar, this is called a gerund, which means it's just functioning like a noun. So we have ruling is for kings. Here the idea ruling is functioning just like a noun there. Or writing is for prophets. Writing is like the subject of that sentence. It's functioning just like a noun, even though it's a participle form. Or you might say the king enjoyed ruling. Again, that's functioning like the direct object of a verb there. Or the prophet detested writing. So let's look at some of the similarities and differences with Hebrew. Hebrew is very similar in how it uses a participle. There are some differences though. First, in English, participles are just their form. They don't really inflect. In Hebrew, the participle is inflected for gender and number, just like nouns are. The participle in Hebrew also, there's a passive participle form. And then some Hebrew participles were used so frequently and so often, they got grammaticalized and turned into nouns. This is particularly true for the nouns like priest, judge, enemy, redeemer, and there's a handful of others as well. So let's take a look at the paradigm. This is using the paradigm root katal, which is a little bit different than what your textbook uses. But this does a good job of illustrating how the participle, what it looks like in the cal stem. So this is the cal active participle. And the masculine singular, well, let me first just say, the participle inflects for gender and number, just like nouns and adjectives. And the endings are the same as the endings for a noun or an adjective. So hallelujah, we can thank the Lord for that. There's really no new endings to memorize here. So the singular, masculine singular has no ending. The masculine plural has the hirik yod mem ending, just like a noun. The feminine singular is either kametz he or segol tav. There's even a couple of other variations with the tav, but it's either going to be a he or a tav. And then the feminine plural is the holam vav tav, just like we learned for the nouns. Now the paradigm for a cal participle is a holam after the first root consonant, followed by a tsere in the masculine singular. So it's O-A. In the plural, that second vowel is going to reduce. We have ko-talim. So kotel, kotalim. The feminine singular, there's two ways in which a feminine singular participle could be vocalized. One is kotelet with the segol tav at the end, or kotela with the kametz he at the end. And then there's the feminine plural, kotelot. So that is the paradigm to know. The main diagnostic feature here to recognize is the holam after that first root consonant, followed by the endings of the participle, which are just like the endings for a noun or an adjective. Here are some more examples of some paradigm roots. This is from your textbook with some other roots. So we have like shema. Notice with that third guttural root, we get an extra kametz in there. Gutturals prefer A-class vowels, so you have like shomea. You still have that OA pattern, but there's that extra, what's called a furtive patach vowel there before the ayin, shomea, or shomaat, feminine singular, shomaim, shomaot. Another very common root is a third hey root, where the third consonant is a hey. And this looks a little bit different. You still have that holam vowel representing the participle, but it's ro-eh. You have a segol hey at the end, or ro-ah, kametz he at the end for the feminine singular. And then in the plurals, the final hey drops out, and you just put the plural ending. So it's ro'im or ro'ot. And then here we have a third aleph root, and so this is yotze, that looks just like the regular strong verb. Yotzeit, notice how the aleph here has quiesced. You kind of act like it's not even there. And then yotzim and yotzeot, that looks just like the strong verb. Okay, participles can be used just like in English in one of three ways. They can be used as predicates, attributed predicate, or substantive. In other words, they can be used like verbs, like nouns, or like adjectives. Now, in the predicative use, this is being used as a verb. So that is, the participle asserts something about the noun, and when it's being used verbally, it can either come before or after the noun it modifies, but it must agree in gender and number. So if the noun that it modifies is a masculine singular, the participle has to be masculine singular. If the noun is feminine plural, the participle has to be feminine plural. But here's the key. In the predicative use, when it's being used as a verb, the participle cannot have a definite article. It has to be indefinite. So here's an example of a sentence here. V'hahar bo'er ba'esh. And the mountain. This is and the mountain. And here's our participle, bo'er. Notice that holam after the first consonant, and then the tsere. It's a masculine singular participle, modifying mountain. And the mountain was burning. with fire. That bait is with, Aish is fire. The mountain was burning with fire. Or here's another example of Ushmuel shokev b'hekal. This is and Samuel shokev. There's our participle form. Holom tzere, was lying down in, and this is actually a definite phrase, in the temple, because in the context it's actually in the temple of Yahweh. It's a word pair form there. Okay, participles can also be used like adjectives. In this attributive use, there's a couple of different ways you can translate it. So I thought there's two examples here. I think it's helpful to look at both of these. So in the first one we have ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz. The first thing I need to say is that when a participle is functioning like an adjective, it must come after the noun it modifies and agree with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and definiteness. So if the noun it modifies is definite, the participle also has to be definite, have the definite article. This is not true in English, of course, right? So, I mean, very literally, the sentence is, the people, the dwelling in the land. We have two thes, where in English you wouldn't have that. Again, just like the adjective. Now, there's a couple of different ways to translate an attributed participle here. One would be to actually treat the participle hayoshev as an adjective, to say, the dwelling people in the land. That's maybe a little bit awkward in English to say. It works better with some participles than others. Another option for translation is to take this definite article on the participle and turn it into a relative pronoun. Translations do this all the time, where you can say, the people who dwell in the land. And that tends to sound more smooth, more natural in English. So the people who dwell in the land. And here the participle is still functioning like an adjective. It's answering, well, what kind of people? The people, which ones? The people who dwell in the land. Here's another example of an indefinite attributed participle. It's Adonai Elohecha, Yahweh your God, is Aish Okela. Okela is a feminine participle. If you remember, Aish, the noun Aish, is feminine, even though it looks masculine. It's actually a feminine noun. So the participle matches that in gender. And here it's functioning just like an adjective. Yahweh, your God, is a consuming fire. Okela means consuming, or an eating fire. Fires eat in Hebrew, so it's an eating fire, a consuming fire. So Yahweh, your God, is a consuming fire. And then finally, participles can be used to take the place of nouns and serve as the subject or object of a verb in a sentence. Here is a phrase from the Psalms, Velo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. And here's the subject is actually this participle, Shomer Yisrael. This is actually a word pair, the one who keeps Israel. And the one who keeps Israel, then we go back and that's the subject of the verb, will not sleep. And the one who keeps Israel will not sleep. And then finally, there are some participles that are used so regularly as a noun that they got grammaticalized and function just like nouns in Hebrew. Like oyev, that's the word for enemy. Notice how that looks like a participle pointing. That's because historically it was a participle, but in biblical Hebrew it's turned into a noun. Oyev, enemy. Kohen is priest. And shofet is judge. Just a couple examples of that. There's also a passive participle in Hebrew. The passive participle, if you take a look at the form here, has the same endings as the active participle. They're the endings of the noun. The way that you tell the difference is you have this shurik, this U vowel, between the second and third root consonants. So katul is the masculine singular, ketulim, the masculine plural, ketula, feminine singular, ketulot, feminine plural. So those are the inflectional endings. Again, the diagnostic features, that U vowel. It's normally a shurik, it's that vowel letter, but sometimes it can be written defectively with just the kibbutz, as you can see in the example down here. One thing to point out with this, with third hey verbs, because there's that shurik, that U vowel there, in third hey verbs, third Third hey verbs were originally third yod, and so that third yod often shows back up in inflected forms, and this is an example of that. You can see this is the passive participle from bana, and you just have an extra yod that shows up here in the masculine singular, banui, banui. And then in the plural, you have that extra yod there as well, benuyim. And you can see the feminine plural and feminine singular there as well. And these can be used in the same way that other adjectives can be used. They can be used attributively. Here we have the covenant, which is written. This might be a good place to turn this into a relative clause. The participle, or the covenant, habarit, which is written in the scroll of this law, or the book of this law. If you want to treat it really like an attributive adjective, you could say, the written covenant in the scroll of this law. That's a little awkward in English. You might want to say, the covenant which is written in the scroll of this law. They can be used predicatively like a verb. It's a very common phrase in the Psalms. Baruch Adonai le'olam, blessed. And there's blessed is the participle, is Yahweh forever. And then finally they can be used like nouns. This is kakatuv b'torat Moshe. Here's that preposition kaf. According to what is written, again, functioning like a noun, like the object of that preposition, according to what is written in the Torah of Moses, in the law of Moses. And then my final note for this lecture is that natan, the verb to give, it has a pretty wide semantic range. It can mean to set, to place, to put, to give. It's very common in Hebrew. It's also highly irregular in its inflection. And I would just take a few minutes to study the chart in your textbook on page 186, where they have the paradigm of natan outlined for you. Rather than me going through every single exception, take a close look at that chart and familiarize yourself with it. It will be worth your time, any time that you invest in it, because it is such a common word.